Hey everyone and welcome back to a new video. Back when I first got into Warhammer in 2002, we were in the midst of 3rd edition 40k, and what strikes me when I think about the game back then is just how thin all of the books were. The Space Marine Codex, which had a pretty extensive range back then, was a mere 48 pages, and even when we saw Codex supplements like Armageddon and Craft Worlds join the mix, the combined weight of the core rulebook and those codexes and codex supplements never even got close to what we see today from just the core book alone. Now, on one level, I think that shows how the hobby has evolved over the years. It's not just a niche tabletop game anymore, but rather an entire franchise with a rich lore and community built around it, and you certainly need plenty of material to feed into that community. It also shows how the core game has really filled out over the years, largely reflecting the increasing pace with which GW is manufacturing new models these days. However, it's also pretty clear that the hobby is starting to feel the effects of book-bloat, and in this video I want to talk about what that is, why it's happening, why you should care about it, and how you can get the better of it. So with all that said, let's jump in. Now, I should say, back in 2002, Warhammer was a very different beast compared to what it is today. Again, it was rather niche, with far fewer models and factions than we have today, and Games Workshop itself wasn't the multi-billion-pound company that it's become since. As such, they couldn't spend time and money producing massively detailed books, let alone coloured print ones, because the sales and profit margins just weren't there to justify those sorts of investments. Turn the clock forward 20 years and you can safely say the market is a lot different. We've now got full colour 150 page codexes and supplements, many of which come with collector variants at release, and a wealth of Black Library releases and art books to fuel the fandom outside of the core hobby. In short, far from simply being a model manufacturer based in Nottingham, England, Games Workshop is now a pretty prolific book publisher, and that would be absolutely fine were it not for the fact that we apparently now need so many of those books to simply play the games. Whether it's the core books, codexes, supplements, chapter approved mission packs, points books, FAQ printouts, and even the faction cards to some extent, Warhammer has become somewhat of an exercise in library management, which has annoyed many players, myself included, not least because of how many of these books overlap and are quickly made redundant as new ones come out. This is the book bloat I want to focus on. So why does the hobby now need so many books? Well, the issue largely stems from what Games Workshop is. At their core, and as they happily admit to, they are a model manufacturer. They make their money from producing models, and have built a game and fandom to help market and sell them. To that extent, you can kind of see the Warhammer games as kind of secondary to the models. That isn't to say Games Workshop doesn't care about the game at all, far from it. But when it comes down to it, Games Workshop needs to sell models. It doesn't need people to play the game to the same extent. And you can see how that approach is working just by how much the models have improved over time, which they really have, and how many people admit to collecting and painting the models without actually playing the game itself. To be honest, in many ways, we've all been in that camp during the last 2 years, and Games Workshop still had a record-breaking set of years during that time. Now, I don't mean to get bogged down in the business of Games Workshop here, but I do want to make sure that you can see the mindset GW has when it comes to its core business. It sells models at the end of the day, and everything else, including the game, helps to achieve that. So how has this all led to so many books in the core hobby? Well, over the years, as the pace of model releases has increased, the need for more regular updates to the rules to accommodate those models has grown with it. You can see that problem in the fact that the Space Marines and Chaos had to have 2 codex in 8th edition to accommodate the Phobos and Demokin releases from Shadowspear, and it looks like we may be seeing a second Space Marine Codex in 9th edition for similar reasons. Alternatively, we do get supplements every now and again to help patch the gaps between those codexes. The Lumineth Realm Lords, for example, got a new set of models and units through the Techlist supplement for Broken Realms. However, these were later packed together in the second version of the Lumineth Battle Tome, just a short while before we heard all about the new edition of Age of Sigmar, which will lead to their 4th book update in just a few years. And finally, we do see Games Workshop trying to tweak rules and points costs after codexes have been released. With rules, we tend to see online FAQs, which, while being free, are a bit of a hassle to deal with, particularly how soon some of them appear after a new codex is released. And with points costs, we now get the chapter approved books, which not only update all the points for the various factions, but also hold the mission packs to help update match play games and events. So between new books, updates to those books, and the regular rebalancing of the books to accommodate newer releases and changes to the meta of the game, you can easily find yourself needing 5 or 6 different publications just to confidently say you're ready for your 1000 point weekly game. You can kind of see the problem Games Workshop has got itself into. Now, to be clear, when I compared this situation to 3rd edition 40k, I wasn't saying that I think we should go back to that. 3rd edition had many other problems back then, but what I do admire is the no-nonsense approach to getting rules into the hands of players, which we haven't quite rediscovered in newer editions. You can see Games Workshop trying to do that in some areas. We have the core rules online, for example, in a simple low page count format without the lore and background. And it's pretty clear that the Warhammer apps are slowly evolving to be a portable way of storing these books, where you can enter digital codes from your physical books to access the rules on your phone or tablet. However, this doesn't get around the issue of why you need to buy so many books to play the game, or why Games Workshop is continuing to scramble over itself to launch a new supplement or FAQ to constantly fix what is now a more fluid and constantly changing game. In a sense, GW has turned Warhammer and its business model into something more akin to Magic the Gathering, and the future intention to launch seasons every 6 or so months going forward only makes that comparison stronger. The issue for all of us, and why it matters at the end of the day, is that games like Magic the Gathering can be exceptionally expensive to get into and stay in, or at least they have that perception outside of the community. If Warhammer takes a similar approach, we could find more and more people getting priced out of the hobby, and that's going to hurt GW's business and our community in equal measure. It's also a particularly acute point given the price pressures we're all feeling right now. Ironically, having all these book updates also means we probably aren't buying as many models, so you can also see how the prevalence of books in the hobby has started to overlap and compete somewhat with the very thing Games Workshop is all about, so it could be in their best interest to address the issue more quickly too. But how might Games Workshop fix the issue itself? Well, really, I think there's two ways they could go about it. Firstly, the slightly more radical approach is to turn the physical codexes into lore and hobby collector books that come with digital codes to access all of the rules online. That's to say, have the codexes without any rules in them, and instead just include the lore on the faction and additional hobby materials such as army showcases, tips for painting, and perhaps even a guide on different ways to play with them, generally speaking of course. Then by having all the rules online, perhaps through the app, you can keep that as the regular up-to-date source, which kind of removes the need for any future supplements or FAQs. I certainly think that would have helped out Lumineth Realm Lords players with their soon-to-be 4 updates. That said, you could still have supplements, but these would be more lore focused, with perhaps some additional content focused around the hobby and Black Library fiction. Unfortunately, I don't think GW is going to try anything like this anytime soon, not least because it means the number of books they sell dramatically drops, and they've clearly spent a lot of time and effort in building up that product range, the design teams, and the manufacturing capability behind them. More so, updating the rules then becomes a duty to the game rather than also being a product they can sell. That might sound exceptionally opportunistic, but at the end of the day, they're less likely to spend time updating rules and models if there's not any monetary benefit for them, particularly given they need to pay the staff updating those rules. The other alternative is to use those same online codes that we find in the back of the codexes to offer discounts on the supplements that later replace or update those rules. Now, this doesn't solve the issue of needing to keep track of FAQs or actually needing to own those supplements, but it could make it less of a burden on people's wallets and thereby less frustrating than it is now. Also, unlike my previous idea, it's actually something GW might want to do, given that they can still produce and sell those books, albeit with a discount. As a side note, I think the second idea also gives some scope for GW to offer discounts for recycling older books and codexes. If they can take our unwanted or out of date books and use that material to produce new books, then maybe there's a way for us all to benefit. Those are just two of my ideas, but let me know if you have any suggestions for how Games Workshop can improve the situation in the comments below. Now, given I'm unlikely to be convincing the GW sales team anytime soon, how can you personally make the most of the current situation? Well, the first thing I can recommend is to buy your books from an independent retailer. I personally use Alchemist Workshop here in the UK because, like many other retailers, I can get 20% or more off my codexes and supplements, which is handy given how many I buy. Alternatively, sites like eBay can offer additional savings, particularly once new supplements and updates come out. This is because the original books naturally have less value, and many people dump them in favour of second editions when they inevitably get released. But putting aside price savings, what's the best way to avoid turning into a walking library during your Warhammer games? Well, having an FAQ on your phone, even as a saved image, can save carrying all those bits of paper around. Just make sure it's easy enough for your opponent to read if they ask. Also, you can do the same if you're using a specific unit from a supplement. Now, the laws are pretty clear, you can't send it to others because of copyright, but I think you'll be fine if you're using it for your own personal use and you already happen to have the book at home. Also, make sure you ditch the core book for the online rules PDF. It's only 26 pages and much lighter that way. And finally, make sure to use the Warhammer apps if you're comfortable with them. Personally, I also tend to bring my physical codex to games, if only to ensure that my battery doesn't run low and I get caught out by surprise mid-turn. If you try even some of those, you'll probably find that you can get away with just having a core codex in your bag, and then dipping into a number of safe photos and PDFs for the rest, and that makes things a lot easier and more straightforward when you just want to focus on playing the game. But before I wrap up, I do want to say that I'm hopeful that this situation isn't going to be as bad going forward. Games Workshop sees the issues players are having with the pace of updates, and this is only going to get more acute given price rises and the squeezes on people's wallets. In many ways, I think this is what is spurning the seasonal approach that GW recently announced, where they can balance rules on a regular bi-yearly timeline, but in a way that is predictable and perhaps a bit more manageable, if the price is right of course. But whether it's an improved app, a better price incentive for supplements, or simply a better way of updating books and codexes going forward, I think we're moving towards a far better and less wasteful game approach going forward, and that's something to look forward to. But I think I'll leave things there for today. If you have any thoughts about the book-bloat that I've been talking about today, or any thoughts on how we or Games Workshop can manage it better, legally that is, then feel free to let me know in the comments below. And as always, I want to say a big thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for more Warhammer content. And I do hope you'll join me for the next video. Until that next video though, do take care.